Sudanisa is married with 5 children. She hasn't seen her husband Osman in nearly 2 years. She is one of many Uyghur people from Xinjiang province in China who live in exile. She says she cannot go home as she fears being detained in one of the notorious re-education camps there, a fate already befallen her husband Osman.
Bizning balalarimiz dadasiz qoldi, biz yolg'iz qoldik. Biz mushu yoshga kelganda kuyinishga muhtoj bo'lganda biz ayrilib qoldik. Ham vatanimizdan ayrildik, ham ota-onamizdan ayrildik, ham evlerimizdan ayrildik.
Sudanisa has no solid information about where her husband Osman is, but we've learned he's just one of a number of cases of apparent deportations of Uyghur Muslims in Saudi Arabia and other countries in the Middle East back to China.
Biz xotanda naydi yaxshi bayashat yaşagan. Biz bir yaxshi yaşap kelavatdik. 2014 tuyuqsiz shu baylarni tutqun qilgan vaqtda, qo'yib bergan vaqtda shu turminachidagi ishlarni tashqi chiqib demaysa.
According to Sudanisa, Osman was first detained for 3 months in a crackdown on Uyghur people in China in 2014. It was then that China began its Strike Hard on Terrorism campaign, following a series of violent events in Xinjiang province. Critics say the campaign has indiscriminately abused the rights of Uyghur people in their homeland on the pretext of fighting terrorism. Fearing further detention, Osman and Sudanisa sought refuge in Turkey and began to move their children over from China.
Barışqa hiç imkan bo'lmadi. Biz basaqlan bizni turmaga solayotgan deb biz shuningdan ansirab vatanga qaytanmadik. Meni izlab naketdi, anam naketdi, dadam naketdi deb shundan surishti qildi.
In 2018, Osman visited Saudi Arabia to make an Umrah pilgrimage, but 2 days before travelling back, he discovered he was being hunted by Saudi police.
Mashinda bir yerga apmangan vaqtda o Saudining saqchilarına puhraj kiyingan adamlar meningki shu yo'lishimning adresiniga izlab beribdi. Osman qana bir parcha xat va shuning bir qo'l qo'ysalam bo'ldi, ko'zini sep tutilibdi shu yerda. Tutqalib shu 15 kun bo'lganda qiynachamga meni bir yerga o'tga tutgan chog'da keyin izlab chiqqanda shu vataniga yo'lga salyapti deb shu xabarni anglab o'tirdik.
Since 2009, China has launched a people's war on terror in Xinjiang to tackle so-called religious extremism. The government began to suppress Uyghur identity and human rights, claiming that violent incidents like the bombing of a train station in Urumqi in 2014 was evidence of widespread Islamist separatism. Today, it's believed over 1 million ethnic Uyghurs and other Muslim groups are detained in camps across the region. Effectively prisons that the Chinese state defines as re-education camps, they say tackle terrorism and alleviate poverty in the region. Former detainees allege that those inside have faced torture if they refuse to renounce their language and religion, a claim which China denies.
Şu özünün ticareti bilen aldıraş kanuna xilaf bir iş kılmagan endi. Anda hükümetden keniden ya bir kendin gep qilib qilmaydi.
Human rights organizations have called the pursuit of Uyghurs abroad a major concern.
Very few of the people to whom we've spoken outside the country who've tried to contact family members who were forcibly returned or who returned under duress are able to have much contact. And we now know people who have gone 2 and 3 and 4, and in some cases more years with no information about what's happened to their family members, which is a terrifying phenomenon. And it's a very effective way of controlling people inside and outside the country.
Osman's deportation from Saudi Arabia has never been reported before. We have discovered even more cases of Uyghurs targeted in this most sacred of places for Muslims. Before the coronavirus outbreak, Saudi Arabia welcomed over 2 million pilgrims each year. Undertaking the Hajj and Umrah pilgrimages are religious duties for Muslims, bringing worshippers from around the world to Islam's most holy sites. Ismail, not his real name, was a Uyghur student who left from Saudi after feeling that he and his family were in danger.
My mom wanted me to call her, then I called her and she said the police visited her and want me to come back immediately in 3 days. She said they just want us to study 2 weeks in Kashgar, in my hometown. But my mother, her last word to me was, never call me again. So we lost our parents and we lost contact with them, all the students. We were really, really terrified. I realized that I cannot go back anymore. I cried when I was praying. I cried. I lost my parents. I lost my brothers. I couldn't stop my tears at the time. I asked help from our school, from our teachers. Can you protect us if the Saudi government wants us to go back to China? My teachers told me they cannot protect us. They are helpless, he said. So I decided to leave from Saudi Arabia. In our school, no one was involved in kind of extremist activism or any kind of terrorist actions. Never, ever.
These China cables leaked last year contain Chinese government instructions on how they run internment camps and enforce mass surveillance in Xinjiang. One directive identifies nearly 6,000 Uyghurs who are abroad or have papers to travel for surveillance by security officials. The order is to track those for whom suspected terrorism cannot be ruled out, individuals who should be arrested the moment they cross the border and placed into concentrated education and training. China rejected the cables as fake news. For more than a year, I've been speaking with Uyghur Muslims who've identified a pattern of Uyghurs in the Middle East who they say have been targeted by local authorities in collaboration with the Chinese government. In Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE and other countries, we've heard stories of Uyghur students and pilgrims arrested and deported. They say they've committed no crimes, whether in those countries or back in China.
I have been in Saudi Arabia and I stayed there 15 days and studied Uyghur community. And I have visited Egypt and I stayed there also a week and studied Uyghur community. I haven't seen anything extreme, but I have seen that they are afraid of me because I have done human rights activity in China.
Abdul Wali Ayub is a human rights activist who has been documenting the Uyghur Muslims who've been targeted throughout the Middle East.
Depend on my study, 5 Uyghur deported to China from Saudi Arabia. And among them, I know 3 of them. I know personally. I have their ID card, I have their a residence permit, and I have a copy of their passport.
Abdul Wali has also found that Chinese authorities frequently put pressure on families back home in order to get people to return to China, hundreds of whom are then imprisoned.
Because the local authority asked them to come back. Without that, their parents under pressure, and without that, their parents sent to re-education camp, concentration camp. From Saudi Arabia, we have 67, and from Egypt, and I confirmed 762. It's very hard to confirm because people afraid to talk.
So why are these Muslim-led countries apparently collaborating in China's crackdown on the Uyghur people? In February of last year, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman made a visit to his country's biggest trading partner, China. There, he signed $28 billion worth of agreements, including a $10 billion deal to build an oil refinery complex in China. During the trip, bin Salman was reported by Chinese state media to have told his hosts,
China has the right to carry out anti-terrorism and de-extremism work for its national security.
Then in July, 50 nations defended China's policy in Xinjiang in a letter that claimed people there now enjoy a stronger sense of happiness, fulfillment and security. Here, the Saudi ambassador to the UN defends signing the letter, flanked by diplomats from the UAE, Bahrain, Yemen and the Arab League.
Once again, nobody can be more concerned about the status of Muslims anywhere in the world than Saudi Arabia and these countries out here. What we have said in that letter is that we support the developmental policies of China that have lifted people out of poverty.
There is a sort of sense of perhaps association, that exists between authoritarian countries that are very frightened of separatist movements and of terrorism and of people that actually they see as threats to political stability. So I think there is the economic relationship and the oil dependency is important, but it's not the only thing that matters. I think there is kind of a political angst there.
There is every likelihood that some Uyghurs living outside of China may be preparing violent or illegal resistance to the Chinese government. In the course of our research, Newsnight has spoken to some who do call for active resistance. But critics believe many innocents are being caught up too.
Beijing has shamelessly exploited fears of terrorism and Islamophobia worldwide to justify its policies in Xinjiang, and to return Uyghurs to China at this point in time is really to violate one of the most fundamental tenets of international human rights law, which is not to send people back to a place where they have a well-founded fear of persecution.
Critics say that Xinjiang itself now represents an extensive internment camp for the 11 million Uyghur people living there. The question for those seeking refuge outside of China is, will they ever be able to see their homeland or their families again? And will there ever be a safe haven for them abroad?